1939, an important year in recent world history as well as Hollywood. So 1939 is the year the Germans invaded Poland. It's one of the most important years for Hollywood. You get Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, a more recent reviewed movie, Stagecoach, and considered one of the top films of all time. Frank Capra directed Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I recently was visiting my parents down in Orange County, and my mom had this recorded from Turner Classic Movies, and we watched it yet again. I have watched this movie a bunch of times, and I have a VHS copy here. I do not have a DVD copy of this movie, unfortunately, and it's one of those movies that you probably should watch remastered. Oh, and actually, this was my mom's copy because it has my mom's name and phone number written on it, but it looks like it was an ex-Hollywood video rental. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and there is the old magnetic strip for security purposes. So I did not realize this is considered a Columbia classic. This represents a commitment to the preservation of popular film culture through painstaking restoration and the best visual and audio components available. This is one of those rare Corey 5 out of 5s. Critics agree it was one of the first 25 films introduced to the U.S. Library of Congress for preservation in the late 80s. It's got an amazing Rotten Tomatoes score, which, again, we make our own opinions, but, it's nice to see what other people think of it, too. Critic average, 97%. Someone's at my door. They're just going to have to wait because I'm in the middle of a review. Audience average with over 25,000 reporting, and I find that sometimes the audience averages on the older movies from the 30s don't kind of hold up very well, but this is high, 94%. And IMDb rare score, anything above the 7s is pretty high for IMDb, 8.1 out of 10. This film had a budget of $1.5 million and went on to gross $9 million at the box office. Something else that I also find on the older movies, box office production budgets and totals were a little hard to track back then. So I don't know how accurate that representation is per the Wikipedia page, which is where I do most of my research. A black and white film in a year where there was a lot of color movies. Obviously, we mentioned Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind. Some great films from 1939. This was a controversial movie. The censor board, the Hayes board, did not like the depiction of our U.S. government. They thought it was packed with dynamite to stir up a lot of controversy. And it was quite a controversial film upon its initial release. Politicians did not like this movie, as it was showcasing government corruption, which is more prevalent today than ever, right? So this is a very important film in the American lexicon. You see the James Stewart character in an amazing performance playing Jefferson Smith, an idealist who gets called to replace a senator who died in office, and they choose him to be the replacement, and controversy starts happening. His role was originally supposed to go to Gary Cooper. So in 1936, 3 years prior, Frank Capra had directed Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, and this was supposed to be a direct follow-up to that film starring Gary Cooper called Mr. Deeds Goes to Washington. However, Cooper was unavailable, and Capra quickly gravitated to James Stewart to be the starring role. He thought it would be a good pairing and a good vessel of a vehicle for Jean Arthur and James Stewart together, which they're great as kind of this semi-couple. Not really, but it kind of seems that way. You never really know for certain. To quote Frank Capra, I knew that, speaking of Stewart, he would make a hell of a Mr. Smith. He looked like the country kid and the idealist, and that's obviously the Jefferson Smith character. He is this guy who doesn't know about the evils of the federal government and how there's a lot of politics and handshaking and backdoor deals, and it's super shady. And he comes in there totally naive to all of it, and they crush him like a bug, which makes his performance so poignant because you see his unfazed way, and then by the end of it, he's laid waste and he's laid bare. The original movie had a completely different ending, a more celebratory ending where he goes back to his hometown victorious over all these people that meant to do him wrong politically. That ending was cut, and I think the ending that you see is a great ending. Spoiler alert, where you see him collapsing with all this hate mail that he had gotten there on the Senate chamber floor. And most of the budget went to authentically detailed set designs of the Senate chambers of the U.S. Capitol, as well as the media rooms and other aspects that they didn't film on location. They had minute details recreated to make it look as authentic as possible. But this really is one of those 5 out of 5 movies. The whole cast, another thing that I read, which I see, is Frank Capra cast a lot of the same people and used a lot of the same people to kind of keep a continuity in his pictures. The guy who plays Uncle Billy in It's a Wonderful Life, he plays one of the meat press gang guys in this film. I loved him in that other movie that I reviewed recently, and I'm looking to see if I could see it on the shelf. The John Wayne movie, the John Ford directed film. I can't think of what it was called. But anyway, this was an adaptation of an unpublished story by this guy named Lewis R. Foster. He wrote this story called The Man from Montana, or The Gentleman from Montana and the Gentleman from Wyoming. And his claim to fame, he was a prolific film and television producer. He wrote over 100 film and TV series. Just an interesting guy. I kind of read a little bit into his bio, the guy that wrote this original idea. And if you haven't seen it and you're not really into black and white or classic movies, this is a good place to start because if it's a very relevant topic now more than ever. Can't recommend it enough. I couldn't imagine this movie being a Gary Cooper movie tied into the Mr. Deeds film. This makes a great standalone picture, and I hope you watch it, and I hope you agree with me that it is one of those rare 5 out of 5s. Until next time, folks, we will see you then.